today I will be talking about early encounters between the early Turk, as they are called in English, the Göktürk in Turkish, and also the Chinese. But as this is the year of China in Turkey, I would like to start with my own encounter with China. It happened sometime in the 50s, just around Taksim Square, in the house of my future, at that time, Chinese teacher. They were also the owners of the Chinese restaurant on La Martin Caddesi. And we were given sweet and sour fish. I was in elementary school, and that was the first impression that I had of China and anything of Chinese. It was so different. And later on, of course, when I started to read on my own, and then also as a student, I learned about China and the Turkic people as two different entities. And as you might, remember from your elementary school or high school years, we have some pages on the Turks in Central Asia, but we don't have, as far as I can remember from my own time, no pages, any pages about China. So this is then, you see, there is the early Turk who are living there, so to say, in a vacuum. And then, of course, we have the opposition. At the beginning, it was a kind of an ethnic opposition, Turks and Chinese, as if they had been born like that from very ancient times. Later on, during my studies, I started to learn more about the differences in the way of life. So the people with whom I have been interested and where my research has concentrated, Turkic people and the Mongols. I started as a historian of the Mongolian period, 13th century. They were nomadic people. They had a tribal way of life. And then China was an agricultural region. And of course, this, again, you see two cultures in opposition. And many thinkers have devoted volumes on these differences. I would say that Owen Lattimore, who wrote in 1940s about the inner-Asian frontiers of China, maybe was an eye-opener. Because in many of the books, it is stated that the nomadic Turks or Mongols, you see, before the 16th century, it is difficult to differentiate between the two, because there is ebb and flow. Sometimes they become Mongolian, sometimes they become Turkic. The language changes. People used to say, because the nomads are poor and hungry, whenever they were poor and hungry, they invaded China to get the riches of China. It was Owen Lattimore in his book who stated that it was not hunger, but it was glut, that there were too many resources available and they had to get rid of them. It was not because they were poor, it was because they were rich. They wanted to unload their livestock. See, their riches were animals. And you cannot make pickles of horse meat, you see. You have to sell them. You have, whatever you have in terms of riches, you have to get rid of them at the closest or best marketplaces. So it made sense that it was the seasons of glut when there was pressure on China, because I read these lines when there was Japanese pressure on United States. And the United States was raising quotas against Japanese goods at that time. So you see, I could make a connection between the two. But all these societies in opposition changed in a way after I took part in the UNESCO secret expeditions. The first expedition was in 1990, in the summer of 1990. And we traveled this whole, I will be talking more about that, this whole region. Let me see, we met here with the group. You see, I would like you to get familiarized with the map of northern China, because it's very important to understand the Yellow River as it comes from the west and has this bend and then flows to the sea. And a lot of history has been going on in this region for centuries. This region in the middle, in the midst of this bend of the Yellow River is called Ordos. Actually, it is a name which was given to that after Genghis Khan. During the time, you see, of the Göktürk, the early Turk, it was not called Ordos. It was, we had Chinese names. But it is now, in general, known as the Ordos region. Now, the Yellow River basin, also here there is a Wei River, and it is along this Wei River that Chinese civilization has prospered. Today everyone knows about the terracotta armies in Xi'an. Xi'an was the name of the new name, but earlier it was called Chang'an, the old capital, along the Wei River. You see Xi'an and Chang'an. Here it is called Xi'an. You see, this is a map from maybe early 90s, so everything is not in pinyin. Today it is written with an X, Xi'an. You see, and it means peace. Peace in the West, Western peace. Now, we met in 1990 in Xi'an, and then we slowly went by bus.
You were a part of
UNESCO secret expedition. We were about 70 buses, and 3 buses were for foreigners, 2 or 3 buses. There were journalists, writers, and also historians. Şinasi Tekin, the Turkish historian and philologist, actually had been invited. But because this was happening in August, he didn't want to go in August. So I was asked, and that was a turning point in my life, because before that I had learned everything from books. Of course, books are important and valuable, but I had not seen them. You see, as we are living in Turkey, and we have layers of civilizations in Turkey, we have the opportunity to go and see and touch all these layers of civilizations. We really do so. But the importance of the geography and relating history to geography has been very crucial in my own education. So from 1990 on, then, there was this trip going to Hami and Turfan, and then also around Taklamakan to Kashgar. It took about 35 days, and it was well organized. But I will be talking today more about these areas. It was in Tian Shui. Tian Shui means heavenly water, or Göksu in Turkish. You see, many geographical names are either in Chinese, or in Turkic, or in Mongolian. They can be Karada, or Karaağla, or Keishan. It changes, but the same concept acquires only a different language. So it's the same mountain. As you know also from other regions of the geography, there are many Karadas and Akdas and so on. And here this was Göksu, like in Konya, for example, we have a Göksu. But until that, it was fine. I was very excited and interested. But I really was shocked and did not know what to think. I was a historian of the Mongolian times, and of course we were going through sites which were related to before the 10th century. So anything before the 10th century we were visiting, not the periods that I had been studying. So, but in Tian Shui, you see, they said that when they heard that I was from Turkey, I remember we were sitting on the near the bank, river bank of Göksu, and they said the people of Tian Shui are handsome and beautiful because they are a mixture of the old Tugen and the Han people. You see, this was something that I really was not prepared for. And here then there was a professor from Xi'an, Professor Li. He made it his task to explain things to me, and he told me that there were Turkic gravestones in this area, and also an empress of the northern Zhou dynasty in the 6th century. Had been from the Ashina clan, the sacred clan, the royal clan of the Turk people. When she got married, many people came with her, and then they lived and died there, and they left gravestones. Also, he said to me that two clans fought with each other. At that time, I didn't know the names of these clans. Şili Kalan and Tuli Kalan, he said, fought. And then afterwards, again many people came with them, and they settled down in these regions. Now this was again, you see, another important. I was thinking of the early Turk in terms of Mongolia. See, Orhan inscriptions, Mongolia, and early Turk. And there we were in northern China, and finding information about the early Turk graves, and also on top of that, a Chinese professor was telling me about the Turks. Actually, I was expecting from him to tell me about the Chinese. You see, when somebody comes here, we tell them about us. We don't tell them about them. So, you see, all of that was very interesting for me. And then, from near Tian Shui then, you see, we went to grottos. So this is the route that we took from Xi'an up to Hami. And again, you see, these are the places that had names like Sukcho, Kamju, and so on in the Islamic sources. So these cities were visited by Muslim geographers, merchants, and they have been put down information about them put down, and then they come to Dunhuang, where there are all these famous grottos, and in Dunhuang was called Shazhou, the city of sand. And today it's also a very sandy area, and we have descriptions that there was a city of the Han, Chinese, and a city of the Muslims, and at night the doors, the gates would be closed, and so on. So this is the way we traveled. And we came to Maijishan. Yes, and I was struck by many aspects. What I'm going to talk about is this. And there are 4 important sites in China: Dongmen, Datong, Maijishan, and Dunhuang. They are all grottos, caves with Buddhas. And they have all started during the 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries under the rule of these mixed foreigners. The earlier English books in English used to translate them as barbarians. Now it is not anymore PC, so we use foreigners. But you see, after the 3rd century, the Xiongnu Empire in the north and the Han in the south, the 2 empires sort of disintegrated, and it was divided into 2 northern and southern dynasties. Among the northern dynasties, there were 5 foreigners and 16 different dynasties. So during this period then, all these Buddhistic architecture in the grottos started. And you see, from far away you can see the galleries, because these are all galleries. There are 72,000 statues here. And I mean, it's not only beautiful, but also it has not become one of the most cherished touristic sites, but maybe in the future. So here then, my Professor Lee told me that there were statues ordered by a Turkish Khan, Muhan Khan. You see, at that time, because all this information was new to me, I took notes. I wrote everything down. And I didn't know the name of Muhan Khan also at that time. But Muhan Khan was the ruler of the first Turkish colony at the end of the 6th century. And we have the Bugut inscription from Muhan Khan, which is in Sogdian, which has been also translated into Turkish by Emine Naskali. And on this inscription, Muhan Khan says, "I and my brother, we both rule the country." So it's a kind of a different, looking from the Ottoman perspective, it's a completely different kind of a rule. 2 brothers ruling together. So Professor Lee told me about this. Again, you see, I learned all of this retrospectively. This is one of the 72,000 statues on the Maijishan. And there are also murals. Usually, when this dark murals, this kind of oxidation stems, I was told, from the 4th century. Usually, this is the Toba way in Chinese. In Turkish, we call them tabgaç. The name tabgaç was spelled in 2 different characters, Toba, but that's the modern pronunciation. In the 4th century, it was pronounced as tabgaç. And tabgaç, according to Wolfram Eberhard, who taught in Ankara for a long time, in the department, was one of the founders of the sinology department. He saw them predominantly as of Turkic stock. But apparently they were mixed. You see, looking at ancient history with our perceptions, trying to see who is Turkish and who is not is our concern. But at that time there were other concerns. And this was a coalition of tribes of Proto-Turkic, because the Turk had not appeared yet, and Proto-Mongolian tribes. So in Dunhuang also, mural paintings, murals from this period have this kind of a color. And usually they are Buddhistic stories, Jatakas, telling us about the life of Buddha, and then there are some historical paintings. So, I mean, just as an example, and you can see how the painter, I mean, nobody has been able to tell how to climb there and how to do all of this, you see, in terms of workmanship. But you can see that the painter knew about horses. Now, this site has remained in my memory, and giving the opportunity to talk this time, I thought I will talk about my Jishan and my experience at that time. Because it was this my Jishan, it was raining a little bit, and where the my Jishan ended and where the clouds started and where rain was is very fuzzy. And all these mountains, the Chilean mountains in the south, were especially looking really beautiful. This is Gansu Corridor. This is the eastern end of the Gansu Corridor. We call them, we have last names. Şevket Aziz Kansu, for example. The way it is pronounced now is Gansu, and we never think of it as a corridor. But it is a corridor, and it was a corridor where, you see, the armies who dominated that corridor could dominate the whole area. So most of the strong nomadic people had were in possession of the Gansu corridor. In Chinese, it is called the corridor to the west of the river. The river is like the Nile, it's the Yellow River. And so this is on the eastern end of the Gansu corridor, and the Gansu corridor is like this, mountains, mountains, and then on the mountains you have terraces, agricultural areas. Until the 13th century, this area used to change hands. When the Chinese were strong, they were in possession of the Gansu corridor. When the nomads were strong, then they had. After Kubilai Khan brought an end to this struggle, since the end of the 13th century, Gansu corridor has been in the hands of agriculturally oriented culture, China. And this view then remained really in my mind. And here again, I would like to stress, you see, here we are in Tian Shui, and Lanzhou is the capital of Gansu province today. And there are Chinese Muslims called Hui, which is like dönmüş. That's why their Russian name is Tungan, Döngen. And so this area is Muslim-oriented. And as you can see, that these Chilean mountains, when we were looking from Tian Shui, we were seeing the Chilean mountains. And these are the southern mountains. And this is then the route that we took. You see, the old cities of Suzhou and Guangzhou, and then also coming to Dunhuang, Shizhou. And Yumen is the Jade Gate, about which I will be also talking. So we are mostly along the Gansu corridor. But you can see how the bend of the Yellow River dominates this area. Now, this is not by me, but you see, in then leaving my Jishan, we came to the end of this, to Jiayuguan area, and we were taken to a tomb. I will show a few pictures from there. And to understand the tomb pictures, I had no way of knowing. You see, a famous professor, economist, André Gundar Frank, was with us. And he used to come and say to me, you have to teach me how to look, because I was looking. But I was looking without understanding. And André Gundar Frank thought I knew. So this Professor Zhang, Dr. Zhang actually, from the Gansu Provincial Museum, somehow understood my problem, and he drew this into my notebook. You see? Because if you had a bald head and then the hair in the back as a hairstyle, then you have the Western kind of the Hu. You see, there are different kinds of Hu, foreigners, barbarians, whatever you want to call them. And they have hair, in Turkish we would say fırça gibi, but this is more like growing wheat. And then, of course, this is the nose, the big nose you can see. And the nose of these people who like to eat mutton. They have big noses. And then their sleeves are narrow. And their coats are like women's coats today, you see? It's towards the left. Whereas, and then they have short overcoats, and then their legs show. They have boots. So a Chinese would be just the opposite of all this. So in August 1990, he drew this into my notebook, and it has been a guidance for me since afterwards, because he was really very detailed. Now we are going into this tomb, and you see here we have one painting, and here another. I will show some details of these, and then we go inside. You see, the ones on the left were musicians. As you can see, they are dressed just like the opposite of Mr. Zhang's drawing. And they are playing music while these two ladies dance and sing. And again, you see, you can see the sleeves. You see, these kinds of sleeves signify that you are not doing also manual labor, and you have other people. So this is, this woman is more, you see, a service person, can be seen from her pants. And these are scenes from daily life, again, which was at the entrance. And you can see the carts, and usually high wheels, but still, you see, look at the long dress, both for men and for women, and also long sleeves. Now, the Chinese have their dress like today, European men, I should say. I don't know how Europe adopted this right and left, but it's like European men to the right. Mongols and Turkic people at that time to the left. And when you are drawing an arrow, then this kind of an opening helps you, gives you room. Now you can see here, you see, the big nose. But you see, these are all people who are from the 16 dynasties, the five who had been living and ruling there, or like plowing the fields. This is the people who came from outside, but they have become part of China. Sometimes we know about the language, sometimes we don't. And at about this time, there are also, but I don't have any pictures of them, the people called Kanlı. So these paintings, mural paintings, are from this book. You see, I didn't take the photographs at that time. I was so astonished, I mean. Now we were in Jiayuguan at the Jade Gate at another tomb. There are so many of them. And these are, you see, small paintings. And you can see from the size of the bricks how big they are. And again, we have many scenes from daily life. I will give here, for example, it's a hunting scene. And the deer. Now they are going on a campaign. You can see also their mustaches and helmets. And then one in detail. You see, at that time there is no stirrup yet. So something like a stirrup is not seen.
Is that Chinese?
Pardon?
That gentleman is
No, I would say this is our local foreigner.
Because of the mustache.
Mustache also, and the way he's sitting and riding. But you see, and this is then how in Beijing today, if you go in the Zhongshan Park to the ancestral tombs of the last emperors, Qing emperors, you see how the emperors made sacrifices to their ancestors. They do it just the same. And for us, this is just upside down, you see, and on a table. So you can see how much our brains have been formed by the Islamic culture. So this is not something we are accustomed to, but this is in continuation. 3rd century, 4th century AD, and I shouldn't say today, I haven't seen it. And then here we have a card, again, with loads on it. As you can see, the head cover is also something, I would say, more universal in Eurasia. Scythians have also these kinds of head covers. And the short coats, again, and narrow sleeves and so on. So my Mr. Zhang's instructions are guiding us. But you see, here it's a different kind of a foreigner. This is not one of us. This is coming from outside, bringing tribute. So you can see that this is from the 11th century. Apparently, he could be a Khitan, but you can see the way the coat is towards the left, and the big nose, whereas you see the people in the north, they not necessarily have big noses. Look at mine, I know, but still, you see, this is the depiction. So, you see, this is an envoy. Now we come also to this is a famous painting from Dunhuang. foreigners are quite emphasized. Again, you see, these are foreigners who come from outside. And these are foreigners who are wailing the death of Buddha. So this theme is called the Parinirvana Buddha. And here we see Buddha lying in Parinirvana. And this is then the feet. And these mourning people wailing are at his feet. Now think of Turkey in terms of a circumambulation, and there is a grave, and people start going around the grave from the foot or from the head. You see, there are people do this wherever you go. You see them, usually heads. You see, and here again I will go back. You see, this is actually, I don't have this in front of it. There are two entrances. So you come from the left and greet Buddha from his head, walk along the corridor, and then come to his feet, and then go out. So I will show a few maybe sites with circumambulation holes, I should say entrances, but this is very important, going around. And the Turkish word for that is dolanmak, but the earlier Turkish word was aylanmak. And our eğlenmek comes from there. Aylanmak, so you see, bir eğlenip geliver, people say on the village. So go somewhere and get lost. And then come again. So here then, this circumambulation is in beautiful. Now here you can see, you see, it's not the same cave. But there is a bodhisattva sitting in front, and then on the two sides you go from left, and because it is Buddha, circumambulation is like the sun, clockwise. From left, you see, to the right. And Buddhists have their right shoulders bare, so if it were Buddha, then they show their respect also with the right shoulder. But I also would like to draw your attention to the ceilings. I have been enchanted, this is just amateur, enchanted with these ceilings, because the ceilings give us what we know from killing patterns, from rugs and so on. So this is like no killing. One design repeated many times. I think. Okay. So in years later, I started to deal with the early Turk, and then I encountered the two Khans that Professor Lee mentioned, Tuli Khan and Shili Khan, in the text. Shili Khan, I have transcribed his name as reconstructed as Eli Khan, was the ruler who became a captive in the hands of the town court in 630. In 630 is the time when the early Turk lose their independence, and they remain as captives of China, Tang China, for 50 years. And this period is described in the Turkic inscriptions. Shili Khan, Eli Khan, had his people, Türk Budun. It was not a paid army. They would gain from trade, long distance trade to China as far as Byzantium, but also from booty. Tuli Khan was his nephew, who had been stationed in the northeast to take charge of the tribes, which were sort of grumbling because they were not happy with the taxes they had to pay. But unfortunately, Tulikan, the nephew, was not very skillful, and he raised the taxes as the expenditures increased and there was a greater revolt. And at the same time, weather conditions, like this year, maybe worse, of course worse. For 3 successive years it was all ice, and animals could not feed themselves. Normally in the nomadic environment, if it is snow or thin ice, then the horses dig holes, they feed themselves, and then on the leftover, the sheep are fed, or the goats and the oxen. But if the horses cannot dig holes, then the horses and everybody else starts to die. And this is, you see, it is not kutluk, but it is worse than in any kind of kutluk, because then there is nothing to hold on. So this was actually the weak side of the nomadic economy, because they could not make, you see, they could not hoard horses. They could not, for grain you can make grain depots and hoard grain. And in times of hunger you can distribute grain. But if you depend on animals, there is nothing you can do, except for sometimes for migration. So Tulikan then, both, and Shilikan, both suffered under these conditions. And then at the end, Eli Khan was taken captive by another nephew and delivered to China. In the records they say they were singing sad songs and weeping, and in a few years he was dead. But I encountered Tulikan's name under these kinds of, you see, these are the bases of statues. I will show more, that the Chinese emperor at that time, Tang Taizong, had erected in imitation of the Turkish custom of Balbal to commemorate his victory over 14 rulers and kings. And they were placed on the northern side of his funerary complex. And there, you see, from Tian Shui coming to this place, I saw Tuli Khan's name on one of the statues. Now, this is the layout of the Tang Emperor's funerary complex. There was another person, Ashina Sumo, again from the ruling family, who did not betray his Khan. He came together with Eli Khan to the Tang court, and he was rewarded for his loyalty to his own Khan, and he was given titles and so on. I won't go too much into detail, but it's interesting because there are long discussions about what to do with these Turk, early Turk. And then statesmen discuss, shall we keep them inside or shall we keep them outside, this and that. At the end, they decide that Ashina Sumo should take them outside of the Yellow River region, to the north. 100,000 people, 40,000 of them armed. So as you see, Professor Lee was saying something very important, talking about the early Turk in China, of which I didn't know anything earlier. They crossed the river, but then these people did not want to live anymore in the steppe. They rose in revolt, and they crossed the river, and they said, we would like to live in the northern part of the Ordos region. Ordos, as you will remember, bend of the Yellow River. So Ashina Sumo here was given here is his grave. This is the emperor's grave. We are in a south-north axis, and Ashina-sumo was given a place in the funerary complex as an honor. And he was also given the dynastic last name Li. So he is not here with Ashina, but Li Sumo. And another person called Ashina Jung was the person who delivered Eli Khan to the town court, another nephew. I mentioned him. He was also given a place in this funerary complex. Jong means loyal, so he was the loyal Ashina who delivered his Khan to the town court, who was loyal to the town, and his grave is really beautiful. Ashina Sumo's grave is only on the map, I haven't seen, but all these graves have inscriptions, not like the way we know outside, but they are inside. A tablet within the soil, so they have been published in this book. So there's a lot of information outside of the organ inscriptions that we can study this period, the history of this period. Now I would like to show you see, this is the Tang Empire at that time, and the early Turk were in the north of this, and you can see the Gansu corridor, just like a corridor binding these two, tying these two together. And this is Tang Taizong. I won't go into detail. Very able, skillful ruler, but he grew up among the Turks. I don't know how much he knew about the language, but he knew about the culture, and he talks about, for example, vows that he had taken with Tuli Khan, and he has his beautiful horses. He was a horse lover, and he talks about his horses as if they are his family, and he tells, he has a poem about all these horses, 6 beloved horses. This is the capital city of Chang'an. Now, of course, it is in the north of present Xi'an. And again, you see north-south orientation. And the north is the more nobler, more sacred part in general. And this is his funerary complex from a postcard. But again, you can see the entrance in the south, and then you walk slowly, and then you come to the mountain. And the emperor is in the mountain, and to the north of the mountain, he has erected the Balbal, the 14 rulers, and also his horses. So the north was sacred for the early Turk too. And also, you see, in the Chinese way, you say the emperor faces the south. When he faces the south, where does he sit? He sits in the north to be able to face the south. But in Chinese parlance, you don't say the emperor sits in the north. You say the emperor faces the south. In the Mongolian and Turkic parlance, you say it is the north, which is the seat of honor. This is then what we see at the back, is the mountain where his tomb is. And there is a small anecdote. Apparently, he had to kill his elder brother to become himself an emperor, and this was a great sin in terms of Confucianism, and his father had to abdicate. So, but at the end, he built also a funerary complex for his father, but his mountain was smaller. So and this Also, you see these animal styles you can, from Tunceli, for example, we have Koçbaşlı, mezar taşları. So at that time, you see, it is very difficult to make that strict line between the two cultures. And this is the Aşinasimo funerary tomb. And the way you go, and there's usually a long corridor, and on both sides there are paintings, and sometimes there are artifacts that have been taken from the tomb. And this is the Jiaoling mountain where he's buried. First his beloved wife was buried there, and then he. And this is the northern side of the mountain. When we went there, it was raining. So we had to buy get shopping bags from a grocery store. That's why our feet are orange colored. This was what was given so that we shouldn't get wet. But the archaeologist who was digging here, you see, was showing us around. And these are the reliefs of the 6 horses. The 5 of them are in the Xi'an Museum. The Museum of Inscriptions. One is in Pennsylvania. And one of the horses is called Tekin, and the other horses show familiarity with nomadic culture, horse breeding, and so on. Here you can see the basis of these 14 statues. I just wanted to show how it is in the Tomyukuk monument. The Balbal, the enemy that has been killed, comes in the direction from the west to the east towards Tomyukuk's tomb. And this is the site of this northern part, the sacred part of Tang Taizong's funerary complex. And these are the remnants of the old Turk, the way with their hair, with uçtuk, as they say in Kyrgyzstan. I don't know how it is called in Turkey. At the end of their hair, they have these little things. The archaeologist who was doing the digging, he didn't know what they were, so I got from a jeweler silver hairpins that were used in the Ottoman times by women. So here you can see again, and you can see the coat being turned towards the left. And this will be the end. There is another funerary complex, Chenling, and there are also statues of Turk envoys. Unfortunately, their heads are not there anymore. On the left, you see the reconstruction of the Kültigin monument. There you can see that how the Kültigin monument has been done in the Chinese fashion. Whereas in the Tomyukuk monument, I'm not going to talk about that
Is
this
that
time.
tortoise? Is that tortoise?
Yes, the tortoise is the Chinese symbol of eternity. So you see, Bilge Kağan Kültigin monuments are in Chinese style as we do our buildings in the Western style right now. And we don't think about that. Whereas Tomyukuk monuments are in the Indo-Asian style because Tomyukuk had grown up in China and he was born and raised in China and he wanted something of Indo-Asian quality for his own monuments. For Bilge Kağan, this was not so important, and this is the Museum of Beylin funerary inscriptions, museum, forest of inscriptions, as it is called. As you can see, there are so many tortoises and so many inscriptions, and you can again see the resemblance. I mean, of course, it was also Chinese workmen who had done that. So, before Islam, I would say, these two cultures were very much these two cultures in the eastern end of Asia. Of course, there were other Turkic people in the western side. This was a different picture. But they were in very close interaction, and there was a lot give and take. What is interesting and what has not been studied, they took, for example, rules of succession sometimes from each other, or they changed their dress sometimes, this and that, but Chinese writing was not adopted by the steppe people, and Confucianism was also not adopted. But in China also, as I showed earlier, government, rules of government, or something like our Tamar system, many things were introduced by our foreigners who came to rule in China. Because in China, the understanding of history is whoever rules this country is our dynasty. So they have not made this kind of distinctions in terms of ethnicity way back in history. And the history before Islam is then strongly interwoven with each other. Thank you.